Hi there, it's Florence here and I'm back again with another episode of my knitting video podcast. Does it look weird with my camera cable coming out of my armhole? I don't have any better ideas, so that's what we're doing today. This will be a standard episode of my knitting video podcast, which means that I'm basically going to be talking about my knitting projects. I start off by talking about what I'm wearing, then I'll talk about anything that I finished, what I'm working on, any new yarn that I've picked up or swatches I've done for future projects. So I'm just going to jump right into it. As usual, I will start off with what I'm wearing. I've actually had a lot of questions about this one recently. This is a top that I knitted probably a month or two ago. If you look for a video with this top in the thumbnail, you'll hear me talk a lot more about it. But this is something that I freehanded and I did end up writing into a pattern. And the pattern's currently in testing and will be released very soon, probably within the next couple of weeks. This is knitted in Knitting for Olive Merino in the colour Dusty Aqua. The Knitting for Olive Merino is my personal favourite yarn for summer knits. I find merino quite comfortable in the summer. I sound like a broken record, I say this every time, but yes, Knitting for Olive Merino makes really beautiful, even looking summer knits, and for the climate I live in, I find it works okay. This top has, would you even call this neckline? Like this sort of wide neck, boat neck. It's almost straight across, but there is some neck shaping to stop it from being too uncomfortable. And then it has an all over ribbed pattern with twisted rib and this wider rib as well. I think it looks really pretty. It's knitted top down, it has I-cord edges, all the details that I personally enjoy. And yeah, I'm sure you'll be hearing more about it soon when I do go and release the pattern. Anyway, in today's episode I have a lot of not original knits, like lots of me following patterns by other people, if that's something that you enjoy. And I guess I'll jump right in with my big finished object for this week. This is something that I had just cast on in the last episode and it's been the main thing I've worked on since. This is, I believe, cardigan number, I'm going to embarrass myself here, cardigan number 9, I think, by My Favourite Things Knitwear. All of her cardigan patterns are numbered. It's been quite a long time since I last knitted anything by My Favourite Things Knitwear. But I was looking for a cardigan that I can take with me on all of my trips this summer. I have like a work trip and then a couple of holidays pretty much right afterwards. And I plan on taking a lot of floral dresses and things like that. And so I wanted to have one cardigan which would keep me warm enough to visit all these cooler climates, but during the summer, so it will still be pretty hot. I just figure I might need an extra layer in like early mornings or in the evenings. It needed to go with all of my different dresses and it needed to be kind of lightweight, and so this is what I ended up making. So this is what it looks like. This pattern, the cardigan number 9, is a saddle shoulder cardigan. So you can probably see there's this piece where the stitches run directly out over the shoulder, and then the front and the back are picked up from these shoulder pieces. I think it is a really pretty construction. It just adds a little extra something to what would otherwise be a very, very plain cardigan. My one downside to it is you are left with a lot of ends to weave in. I think I was weaving in like 7 ends round each armhole and more along the neck and shoulders, and there was just a lot. I do think it's worth it though, because I feel like for a piece like this that is so simple, and I wanted something basic that would pair well with everything, it really matters getting the details right, and I think that's something that My Favourite Things Knitwear tends to do quite well. Like very plain pieces with a slightly more interesting fit or very well thought out details. Should I start with the yarn or the pattern? Let's start with the pattern this time, let's mix things up. As I said, this is cardigan number 9 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. It's a saddle shoulder cardigan. Now the pattern is written very much like all the other My Favourite Things Knitwear patterns. I know she's one of the most popular designers. I'm sure a lot of you have knitted some of her designs before, and I didn't notice anything particularly wrong with this pattern, so if you like her other patterns, you'll probably like this one as well. You do have to use your brain a little bit when it comes to things like spacing out the buttonholes, but I don't really think there's a good alternative to that. Like everybody's cardigan is going to be a slightly different length, so you are going to have to like count some stitches and do some division or whatever. One interesting design feature that this cardigan has is it does have a double knitted collar. I have done these before on other pieces, like some freehand stuff I knitted years and years ago, but basically the way it works is after picking up stitches to add the collar, you do a few rounds of double knitting here before you start doing the rib. It adds a little bit of extra complexity to the collar, which is kind of cool, just a little extra detail to keep your eyes interested. But it does actually make for quite a stable edge as well. Like, it has that double thickness bit, which does add a little bit of structure and support to the collar and stops it from becoming loose, which I think is something that happens often with these sorts of ribbed collars on the tops of cardigans. In terms of other things that are done to stop the collar from stretching out, this is one where you knit like a collarless cardigan first and then you pick up stitches to add the collar afterwards. And because of that, you end up with quite a lot of stuff going on that adds a little bit more structure to the collar. There's obviously the cast on edge from when you first start knitting this piece, but there's also the bind off, because like you cast on, you knit down, then you pick up stitches, you knit up, and then you bind off. And for the bind off, I did do a tubular bind off. I know a lot of people really like tubular bind offs, and just like to get rid of any ambiguity, because I know sometimes translations in patterns are not super consistent. When I say tubular bind off, I mean like an Italian bind off or a sewn bind off, but with the 2 additional rounds first, where you slip stitches like the double knitting rounds before you do the sewn bind off. And I do find that sort of cinches in the bind off edge a little bit more. So I don't generally bother with them, but I think that it is very effective here because it does make this neckline hold its shape. I know the head hole looks very small, but I'm sure this will stretch out with time. For anyone who's interested, because I get a lot of questions about like which bind off to use and what the difference is between an Italian and tubular bind off, whether those extra 2 setup rounds are worth the effort. So this top edge is a tubular bind off. So it does have the 2 setup rounds. And then for these sleeves, I think I just did, just a regular sewn or Italian bind off. So if you can see the difference between those two, maybe it's worth doing those setup rounds. Again, this is the one with the tubular bind off, and this one is an Italian bind off. To be honest, I don't think it is necessarily worth the extra effort unless it's a case where I want to add a little bit of extra structure, and slipping those stitches just makes that bind off edge a little bit tighter. While I'm at it, I'll say I did a tubular bind off for the button bands, and then I did an Italian bind off on the bottom of the cardigan. So I was really mixing up techniques a bit here. I think every bit of ribbing on here I did with a different needle size as well, which sometimes was specified in the pattern and sometimes was just me doing what felt right. Like I wanted the cuffs to be a little bit more snug, but I didn't want the bottom of the cardigan to cinch at all, so I think I went down 1mm from the stockinette size to do the bottom of the cardigan, 1.5mm to do the cuffs, and maybe 2mm to do the collar. Okay, I will move on to talk a little bit about the yarn. The yarn that I used for this cardigan is Rauma Fivel. Look at me being all prepared. I have a ball of it right here. So this is a yarn from a Norwegian brand. Rauma is a Norwegian brand, and it is a Norwegian wool yarn. 100% Norwegian lamb's wool, I guess. 100 meters per 50 grams, which is honestly a pretty decent yardage for how thick this yarn is. It says the gauge is 16 to 18 stitches per 10 centimeters on 4 to 5mm needles. Last episode, I think I showed a few swatches I'd made on different needle sizes with this yarn. I think you can probably get 16 to 18 out of this, but I felt a 15 stitch to a 17 stitch gauge would be the most comfortable. And this cardigan I think is knitted up to a 16 stitch gauge. So for this I used 5.5mm needles, which is up 1 needle size from what the pattern asks for. So for basically everything else, if I was following the needle size in the pattern, I just went up 0.5 millimeter. It's not a perfect science, but it worked well enough. This yarn really does transform with blocking. I did make a post on my Instagram story where I showed a clip of me wearing this cardigan before it was blocked and then again after it was blocked. I'll put it here for anyone who is interested. Every time I speak about blocking on this channel, I get a lot of comments from people who say that they never ever block their knits. And I don't really understand how. Like, my knits always look terrible until I block them. I did get some responses to that story saying things like some people don't knit garments, which is probably true. You can probably get away more with not blocking a hat or an accessory. Also that for people who use acrylic, maybe blocking isn't particularly effective. So those are some fair points, but if you are a beginner knitter watching this and you don't block your knits, hopefully this will at least encourage you to try it out because it really does transform a piece like this. You really do just have to have faith in your swatching and trust that everything will end up fitting fine once it's blocked, because it looked very, very strange beforehand. Now, I wanted to put wooden toggles on this cardigan. I think that's what is on the sample in the pictures on the pattern, and I mentioned this in the last episode and I hadn't bought the toggles yet, and Valentina, who has the yarn shop My Ivory Room, this isn't really promotional, like she doesn't sell these, she bought them for a personal project, and I think she said she tried to buy 5 but accidentally bought 5 packs, so she offered to send me the toggles to put on this cardigan, and they were the dark wooden ones that were what I really wanted, so I said yes, and she mailed me this like massive bag of these wooden toggles. So if you're based in the UK and you're knitting this cardigan, do let me know and I can send you the remainder of the bag of toggles. Like, they can carry on traveling around, they can go on somebody else's cardigan. I think there's probably about 15 or 20 left, so definitely there are enough for your cardigan, and then we can all match, and these toggles will go to good use because I don't want to see them go to waste, and I don't know how many more projects I'm doing which will use buttons like this anytime soon. She also very kindly sent me, and I guess this is sponsored because it was a gift. I mentioned in the last episode that I was knitting multiple projects on 5.5mm needles, and so every time I switched project I had to like take the needles off my interchangeable set and put stoppers on, and it wasn't the end of the world, but it was pretty frustrating. She did mail me also a set of my favourite needles, which are the C-knit knitting needles. I've used them for pretty much all of my projects for 2 or 3 years now, in 5.5mm, which was very, very kind, and that did make my life a lot easier while working on this project alongside another one I'll show you in just a second. Overall, I'm very happy with this. The yarn is not too scratchy. Like, if you don't like wool, you will not like this yarn, but for a Norwegian wool, I do think it is quite soft. It just looks beautiful and even, it really fluffs up, and the fabric becomes very smooth and very pretty. We will have to wait and see if it pills, but overall this cardigan seems to do exactly what I wanted it to do. I think it really will fill that niche in my wardrobe where I can wear it over a lot of different floral dresses and take it as my outer layer on some of these trips. And yeah, I'm just super happy with it. This, by the way, is the smallest size of the cardigan, I think. I normally end up knitting the smallest size of my favourite things knitwear patterns. The size ranges, I don't think it's great in either direction actually. I think it's better than it used to be, but definitely the smallest size is very often too big for my taste. Like, even if it's designed for my measurements, I would often want to size down on my favourite things knitwear patterns, and because I'm already the smallest size, I don't have the opportunity to. And I am not a particularly small person, so hopefully you can find this pattern in a size that fits you if you're interested in knitting it, but if you're much smaller than me, you might have to fiddle around a bit with gauge, which is always frustrating. In this case though, this size did work perfectly for me, knitted exactly to gauge. Okay, so I'm going to speak about my work in progress pieces now. That is my only full finished object, and to be fair, I have knitted on it a lot over the past couple of weeks, but I have good progress on some work in progress pieces as well, so I will show those. Starting with this one. Sorry if you can hear the needles clicking, I should probably put them on stoppers before I try and show them in one of these episodes. This is, I mean, I guess it's an ad, the pattern is gifted because this is a test knit. I bought the yarn myself though. This is a test knit for Woozy by Celine, who I think is also a knitting podcaster on YouTube, and this is her first ever pattern. I spoke a little bit about that in the last episode. This is called the Winnie sweater, and I was asked to test knit it, and I did say yes. I'm trying to cut down on my test knits, but this one was just too tempting. I really wanted to knit this, so one more I guess before I go back to working on more original stuff. This is a very plain, unfinished stockinette jumper with no rib on the edges. So all of the edges are done with this sort of no rolling stockinette technique. It looks really clean actually, and this hasn't been blocked, so you can see these edges are already not rolling. This is the bottom edge of the jumper as well. You can see they're doing a pretty good job of staying flat despite not being blocked yet. So I think once they're blocked, they will lie perfectly flat. I don't know if this is the original technique or one that's already in other patterns. Maybe have a Google and see if you can find tutorial videos if you're interested. Where should I start with this one? Let's start with the yarn. Now, I did speak a bit about this in the last episode, so I don't want to repeat myself too much. This is the yarn that I'm using though. Because this jumper is very, very plain without even any ribbing, I wanted a yarn with a little bit of visual interest to it to sort of balance that out. And so I ended up going with this one. This is from Camarose, which I think is a Danish yarn brand. This one is called Hurst. Does that mean autumn? It's made of 75% organic cotton, 16% wool and 9% cashmere. And this colour is 8200 marmor. It has 17 to 18 stitches per 10 centimeters on 4mm needles and has 120 meters of yarn per 50 grams. So if I show it to you, maybe you can see. It is like blue-grey and it has this, look at me doing the little early 2010s beauty guru hand motions. It really does help though. It's like blue and grey speckled. It really is very pretty. And the construction of this yarn is kind of like a cotton chain. Can't really tell. I mean, yeah, it looks basically like a chainette yarn with wool blown through it. Something along those lines anyway. If you don't like cotton, like me, I'm not a huge fan of knitting with cotton. This doesn't feel much like cotton at all, even though it is primarily cotton. Obviously it won't have the elasticity of wool, but at least in terms of how it feels in my hands, it definitely feels more like a wool-based yarn than a cotton one. Since the gauge is way off with that yarn, I am holding it with mohair, and the mohair I'm using is Isager silk mohair. The colour is 2S. I think this is like the light grey colour. It's quite a warm light grey actually. It is very pretty. And I think this will work fine with like a blue mohair or a grey mohair, but I went with the grey and they look great together. I purchased both of these from Loop Knitting in London. It's a very nice shop and not one I'd been to before. Okay, so the yarn, I won't even talk about the Isager mohair. I've used it for so many projects before. It's a great mohair, a little more expensive, very soft. That's about it for that. The Hurst I'm really liking. It feels great and I really like how this is looking. I love the colour variation in it. The one thing about this Hurst that is driving me to madness is the number of knots in each ball. Like, it was reaching a point where I'd start a new ball and I'd knit it with about 2 feet of yarn, and then there'd be a knot and I'd just have to like undo those 2 feet, cut behind the knot, start over. It's very frustrating, particularly because this is the kind of yarn that you can't splice. So every time I have to cut out a knot, I have more ends to weave in, which is really irritating. Like, you can see how many ends I have on the bottom edge of this jumper. And these are just from like cutting knots out on the last couple of rows. I haven't worked on this that much because I was like really finishing that cardigan, working hard on that because I want to take it on this trip I'm going on. But I've now sort of taken this back as my primary project for the time being. And I'm a little way into the first sleeve. To talk a little bit about the pattern, this is the smallest size I think, and it's slightly off gauge, so it will end up being slightly smaller than the smallest size. I do try to stick to gauge well when I'm doing a test knit, but this is slightly off because I really like the fabric on this needle size. I didn't want to go up a needle size because I figured the jumper would lose a bit too much structure. This is, I believe it's called contiguous shoulder shaping. So you start off by increasing on both sides of these 2 stitches that go along the shoulder. You do that every single round. And then you start increasing like between the markers that are separating those 2 stitches out after that to put in a lot of sleeve stitches. And then at the bottom you finish it off with some raglan shaping. So it's sort of a 3-phase yoke. I've done this quite a few times before. The Petite Knit April cardigan uses this method. My pattern, the Tombow tee, uses a similar method as well. There are a lot of patterns that use it. I think it's one of the better fitting shoulder constructions. I really think it helps give like a nicely shaped yoke with sort of rounder armhole shaping. And I really like how it kind of resembles like a seamed garment in that it has like a seam going along the shoulders and then directly down to separate the sleeve from the body rather than like having raglan shaping, but without the effort of doing a set-in sleeve. I just really enjoy this construction in general. This is a super fast knit. I have only just got this far because I've been prioritizing other things, but I think this is a project that you could knit over the course of like 4 days or something if you were trying. And I'm quite excited because now I'm reaching the most interesting part of the design, which is it has flared sleeves. I'm really looking forward to knitting those. I haven't been reading ahead in the pattern. I probably should be, given it's a test knit. But yes, I'm really excited to see how it looks, try it on. I really think I will enjoy wearing this. However, my mum has also expressed interest in this jumper. She's about the same size as me, and like everything about this design just screams her. From the colour I've used to the flared sleeves, it's all something she'd love. So we'll see how attached to it I am when I'm done. It might end up being passed on to her. So yes, summary for this is that it's proving to be a really pleasant knitting experience. The test knit is really nice. The pattern is extremely well written and already well thought out and edited even prior to testing. And I am really enjoying these yarns. Like, I will probably be happy to use this camarose Hurst again. I just hope the number of knots in the last ball was a one-off and it won't continue to be the case for subsequent balls of yarn. Because this fabric, it just looks so pretty and mild. I really, really like it. I almost knocked over my camera reaching to grab my next work in progress while I'm still plugged into the camera via this microphone cable. Anyway, on to the next thing. So this one is a knit along, but I am pretty resigned to the fact I probably won't finish it by the time the knit along technically finishes. Just because it is a larger project and I have other things I want to be working on. So I'm definitely behind on progress compared to a lot of other people, but I'm having quite a lot of fun knitting it. This is a knit along I was asked to join by Enso Knit, who is really great. You should definitely follow her. She knits a lot of stuff and she's hosting this knit along with a couple of other people. This is a knit along for the Surrey Nordland Book Club cardigan, which is an all-over cabled cardigan with pockets. I'll pop the picture here. I did show it in the last episode as well. This thing is definitely a lot of work, although honestly it's not on particularly small needles, so it'll be quicker than you think, I'm sure. But it is so beautiful. And so far I'm finding it easier than I expected it to be. I guess I'll start off with the yarn I went for. In the last episode I did show a swatch. I had just picked up this yarn. I bought it myself from the Oxford Yarn Store, which is my local yarn shop. I did order it online. It's quite a long walk and I don't often have time to walk an hour each way to the yarn shop. The yarn that I'm using is tried and tested sandnes garn pure gynt. I really like this yarn. I have so many pieces that I've knitted in this yarn. I've even done a full cable jumper in it before. The petite knit Moby sweater I knitted in this. This one is in the colour 1035. They do have colour names, but they're never written on the packaging, so apologies. And this one is grey. It's from the Tweed line. I think they're normally 100% Norwegian wool, but this one is 100% Norwegian wool and 25% Peruvian tweed from wool. I do not know what 25% tweed means or how 25% of this is tweed. I don't know if it's just some of the wool content with lumps in it or something, who knows. But it's a grey colour with little tweed specks. I don't know if you can see this at all, but the tweed specks are like purple and yellow and also brown. So it's actually kind of a unique tweed, and I probably wouldn't have bought it if I saw the tweed specks were purple and yellow. But it arrived and I only noticed once I saw it in person, and I don't think it looks too bad. Like, it's not that noticeable unless you get up very close. And I guess it's me trying out some more interesting and unusual yarn, right? Which is a good thing. It's supposed to be knitted in a sport weight and mohair, so like sport weight plus lace weight, but mohair is a little bit more, it's not thicker than other lace weights, but because of the fluffiness it bulks yarn out more than other lace weights. So I went for this DK, and then I'm pairing it with like a thin lace weight instead. And for that I'm using isager alpaca 1, which is also a yarn I've used so many times before. It's just a great budget lace weight strand to hold with other things. It doesn't have to be the isager one. I know Felkalana make one. I think Sandnes Garn do make one as well. You can get these sorts of alpaca lace weights all over the place. This is 400 meters per 50 grams, so like you get a lot of yarn in here. For comparison, I think this has only like 91 meters per 50 grams. And this has like twice the yardage of mohair, so basically you only need 2 or 3 balls of this to hold it with another strand to knit a garment in a size extra small. With that being said, my gauge swatch came quite far off gauge actually. it was definitely too tight and I didn't want to go up another needle size, so I decided to size up. Now, I think Sari Nordland has a fairly good size range. I might be wrong about this, at least on the smaller end. I've knitted a couple of her patterns before. I've knitted the Levy pullover and Luma pullover, both of which are colourwork yoke worsted weight jumpers, and I think both times I might have knitted the second size. Like, I don't think I'm the smallest size in Sari Nordland's patterns. And for this one I sized up and I'm knitting the third size. I didn't really do the maths. I was just like, I'm not that far off gauge, I'll just size up one size and it'll be fine. I probably should have done the maths in more detail, but now I'm knitting it, it looks pretty big, so I think this will be a nice oversized cardigan maybe. I cannot stop yawning and it's going to make the editing process so much harder than it needs to be. Anyway, I cast on. It's knitted from the top down. You start at the back of the neck, increase along the shoulders, and then you pick up stitches to knit the front sections over the shoulders. And then I assume you join all of that to work them all together as one piece flat for the body. And then the sleeves go on last. It's one of those. And this is what I have right now. So I finished the increasing to shape the shoulders, and now I'm just working back and forth in this cabled pattern. So I never really know what to expect when I start knitting something cabled, because I feel like it can be very simple or very complicated depending on factors that you can't really tell before you look at the pattern. If the cables are all on one chart, I find it's quite easy. Like, you just follow the one chart back and forth, you cross off what row you're on. You can often memorize the chart. If the cables are on multiple charts and those charts are different lengths, like if you have a 10-row chart for one cable and a 7-row chart, say, for another, then you'll only have those match up every 70 rows if they're like co-prime, and so you have to keep track separately of what row you're on each cable chart. And even if you are keeping track in your head and you can read your own knitting well, it's still extra work to like figure out for each section of cable what row you're on, whether you need to be cabling that row, that sort of thing. This, thankfully, is all on one chart, and even nicer than that, you kind of assume that the cabled sections on each side are like mirror images of each other. They're not, they're actually like translations of each other. So you're just working the same chart twice, once here and once here, and it is a single chart. So it's actually quite easy, mindless cable knitting. Sari Nordland is obviously a very well-known designer. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of her. I believe she's a Finnish designer and she does a lot of cable lace, like textured patterns. And I think because of that, she's super experienced with writing these patterns, and from my personal experience, they're very good. So far, I've been very happy with this pattern. It's been clear, laid out well, no ambiguities. The charts are easy to read. Yeah, I've liked it a lot. It's going to be so interesting to see how it blocks out, because right now this is a very strange shape, but I think it will block out really nicely. Compared to most jumpers with this sort of construction, where you knit this sort of trapezium shaped piece for the back, and then pick up stitches and knit over to the shoulders, this one has a really small back of the neck. It's only this long, if you can see. That's how long the cast on edges, and the rest of this is all formed with increases. So I'm kind of interested how that will fit. I mean, I'm not questioning it will fit well, I just haven't knitted anything with that kind of shaping before. I should show you the cables in a bit more detail since we're here and since I've gone to the trouble of knitting them. It's double moss stitch here, then there's this like very beautiful symmetrical cable that I really like. This is super easy to do. Then there's this big one with these two twisting sections, and then like a single moss stitch in the middle. These stitches all have different names in different countries, I feel, so I'm sorry if I'm referring to them wrongly. That's just what I always call them, like double moss stitch, moss stitch. I think the pattern refers to this one as moss stitch. Yeah, do correct me if I'm wrong about this. And then it repeats this first cable again here, and that is it for the cabled section. So it looks complicated at a glance, but it's really not. Something else nice about these cables that makes them very mindless and straightforward knitting is the fact that you definitely don't need a cable needle for any of these. You only ever do like at most two cables, like two left cross, two right cross. So they're super easy to do without a cable needle. I mean, I guess you can tell that if you look at it carefully, but it's just one of those things I don't think about till I jump into the pattern, and then it's a pleasant surprise when it ends up being easy like that. I'm super intrigued to see how the pockets are constructed. I haven't read the pattern in much detail. I know some people are skipping the pockets, that's definitely something you can do, but I think I will add them if just for the experience of putting those sorts of pockets onto a piece like this, because it's not something I've ever done before, and I think it will be interesting to try out. So yeah, I'm making sure I'm taking my time on this. I will probably not finish the knit along by the deadline, but I think it will be like a nice piece to have in my wardrobe. And yeah, I feel like when I first started knitting, I was knitting a lot because I just wanted to fill my wardrobe with beautiful hand knit items. And all these years later, I have more hand knit items than will ever fit in my wardrobe. I own far more jumpers than any person reasonably needs. And so I don't feel that drive to like finish a million things anymore. I mean, I do a little bit because I like talking about them on YouTube, but it does give me more opportunity to work on slow projects like this. My fingering weight colourwork days are approaching, I am sure. I'm just having a good time with it. I enjoy this pattern a lot, and if you want to join the knit along, I'm pretty sure you still can. If you check with any of the organisers, I'm sure they can add you to the group chat. There is a group chat which is super active with people talking about working on this project, and I think it's like a bit of a book themed knit along, since this is called the Book Club Cardigan. So people are also sharing book recommendations if that's your sort of thing. Yeah, you should check it out. Okay, so those are my current really active work in progresses that I've made a lot of progress on. And I do have a swatch I've knitted for a project which I will show you and talk a little bit about. So this is what we have. Before we go any further, can anyone guess what this is a swatch for? Okay, so I'm dropping little bits of yarn from this. Oops. You may remember in I think it was the last episode, I showed my finished Winter Olympics. Wait, the 1992 Albertville Winter Olympics official jumper of the Norwegian ski team recreation, which is by Dala. I really enjoyed knitting that jumper. I'll put a picture of it here in case you haven't seen it. It is completely ridiculous. It was a lot of fun and I want to make another one. I said I was going to really take my time with this jumper and like knit it in spring, have it ready for winter. I actually sped through it because I was enjoying it so much, and so it's now done and I want to make another one. And this time I am going to take my time with it because this one is harder. So I'll put a picture here. This is the 1994 Lillehammer Winter Olympics official jumper of the Norwegian ski team. You may notice 1992 and 1994 are only 2 years apart. So why is there an Olympics in both of these years? Well, here I am with my fun Olympics themed facts for you. I really like the Olympics. I know that's kind of a hot take, but I really enjoy watching it. I get really excited about it. So this is a fun thing to be doing in an Olympic year. Anyway, 1992 was the last year that the Summer and Winter Olympics were held in the same year. So 1992 had both a Summer and a Winter Olympics. Then 1994 was a Winter Olympics only. And then 1996 was the next Summer Olympics. And from that point onwards, they alternated every 2 years. Anyway, that was a small tangent. I'll put the page back up. This is probably the most recognisable one of these Dala Winter Olympics jumpers. A lot of people have asked me if it's the same one Knitting Traditions knitted. It is. I think this is the one that I've seen the most people knit. Like the last one I knitted, the Albertville one, was such a dead Ravelry page. Nobody knits this jumper. But this one is quite popular and for good reason. It's really a showstopper. So I really wanted to do it in sort of show-stopping colours. I did a very classic jumper last time. This time I wanted to do something a little bit more pastel, and the yarn that I picked up which I wanted to use for this project is this one. This is from Rosa Pomar. Now I've used a Rosa Pomar yarn before and I did not get along with it. This was the Rosa Pomar Retrosaria Mondim, which is a sock yarn that's made of 100% wool. It was a very nice sock yarn to knit with. I know a lot of people who are very into non-superwash, 100% wool, no nylon sort of yarns really like it for socks. And I'm also a non-superwash girly, but that yarn without the nylon just did not hold up. I think I wore the socks about 3 or 4 times before I had a big hole in them that I had to darn, and that was the end of my investigations into nylon-free sock yarn. Actually, not necessarily. I have a few sock yarns in my stash which use other things as alternatives for nylon, but that will be the last time that I use 100% wool for sure. Anyway, it was definitely nice yarn and I think I would have really enjoyed knitting something other than socks with it. So I'm giving Rosa Pomar another go. This one is called Vovo. I'll just show you the packaging again because I think it's so cute. It's like a tattooed grandma hugging a sheep. This is a Portuguese non-superwash wool from the Camponesa sheep. But yeah, it's made from a native breed of southern Alentejo and Algarve. This yarn is really nice. If you like non-superwash wool, I think you'll really like this. The colours are very pretty. There are a lot of these sort of muted, almost pastel-y shades, which I think are really beautiful. And it's, I guess, a sport weight. It's 143 meters per 50 grams, and it says 20 to 23 stitches per 10 centimeters. Now, this doesn't feel anywhere near a DK to me. The Olympic sweaters all have like a 24 stitch gauge, I think, and they're supposed to be knitted with a lighter DK. And last time I used Isager Jensen, which is really a true DK, and that worked pretty well. I did manage to meet gauge. This is quite a bit thinner, and so I definitely wanted to do some thorough swatching before I start. With a jumper like this, you know, you're knitting a lot to finish this piece, like it's a lot of work, and so I really want to make sure that I'm getting the gauge correct. I really liked the fit of the last one I made, and so I'm hoping this one will be just as good. So I went ahead and I knitted a gauge swatch. Now I think the pattern actually tells you to use 3 or 3.5 millimeter needles, whichever meets gauge. I knew that was never going to work for me. My colour work definitely sits at a much tighter gauge than my non-colour work stockinette. And this swatch that I knitted is a 28 stitch gauge. So this is a 20 to 23 stitch gauge yarn, supposedly. I knitted it on 4mm needles, so, you know, DK kind of needles, and I got this 28 stitch gauge colourwork swatch. This is why we swatch. You know, the worst part is I actually really like the fabric. It's pretty dense. I think it looks quite good. Now, this design doesn't look anything like the finished jumper, which is why I was like, oh, have a guess. Because most of the jumper is just with 2 colours, and it has a very recognisable motif that is not here. This is just a part of the multicoloured band that I guess goes around the bottom of the jumper and maybe also along the shoulders. The reason why I wanted to knit this for my swatch is because I know that the blue and white look good together. I'm not worried about that part, so I thought I would knit the swatch with all of the colours, because most of the colours only appear for a few accents, and I wanted to make sure that they all look good there. And I do think the colours look pretty nice. I kind of wish there's like a limey green. I mean, you can probably see it better by looking at the ends than at the colour work. And it's not super visible. I kind of wish there was more of the limey green. But overall, I think this looks pretty good. I don't think I'll change it. The way I knit the swatches in colour work, by the way, is I do 1 or 2 chart repeats. I think this is a 32 stitch chart repeat, so I just cast on 32. Then I join in the round and I knit the whole swatch with magic loop, and then I wash it. I guess technically what I probably want to do is like block it as a tube, then cut it, then like wet it again so I can block it flat. But to be honest, I just like wash this once, then while wet, cut it open, and then block it down flat. Like when I actually steek this garment, because it is a steeped garment, I'll be much better prepared and the cut will be neater. But I find doing a really haphazard chop of my swatch like this just really reassures me that I can do a terrible job and just hack this thing open and it's not going to fall to pieces. And that's good to fill me with confidence for the actual steeking process when I sew it and I felt it before I cut it. So yeah, this yarn really does steek beautifully, it knits colourwork beautifully, and I like the colours. And so even though the gauge is nowhere near, I still want to use this yarn. So here is the game plan. I'm going to knit another swatch, and I'm going to do it on 4.5mm needles. I think that this will be fine. I think the fabric will still be okay, and I think it will make the gauge a little bit more reasonable, although I don't have any delusions that it's going to go from being a 28 stitch gauge to a 24 stitch gauge. I'm thinking I might hit maybe like a nice 26 or something, you know? And then when I've done that, I'm going to probably knit this jumper, but do all my own calculations to figure out how to make it fit me, rather than following a pattern for a specific size. This is basically what I did for the Albaville sweater, and I really like the fit of that, so I plan on following approximately the same construction. For that, I just knitted 1 big tube for the body with a stitch count that I made up to get the width of body that I wanted. And I did the same thing for the sleeves. I just knitted tubes with stitch counts I made up to get the sleeve circumference I wanted. And because this jumper has no like shaping, you don't have to worry about when to start increasing for the bottom of the armholes because you just chop the armholes with scissors. I think it really is that simple. Like, knit a body to a circumference you like, that's just a tube, knit 2 sleeve tubes to a circumference you like, and then the rest is all scissors and can be done to fit. So I don't think being way off gauge is actually a problem here. And this finer yarn looks really beautiful and detailed when knitted up in colourwork in a way that my slightly chunkier true DK weight ski jumper doesn't quite look. So I'm aware of the fact this will be a much slower project, that there will be much more colourwork, but that's good, right? Because it's like a nice step up from the last project. I'm continuing to challenge myself. Also, I plan on filming a lot during the process of this jumper, and I want to make a dedicated video on how I made it. I've had so many messages about these jumpers, these like Norwegian vintage ski sweaters, from people who want to knit one and who are really intimidated by it. And it's not a hard project, so I'm just going to like film a walkthrough, show everything that I do, and try and demonstrate how not difficult it is. I'm really not a great colourwork knitter, so if I can do it, you can do it. And I promise, even if you're a beginner at colourwork, you will be fine. Like, this is really not difficult colourwork to knit. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this project. I plan on casting it on pretty soon. I'm kind of tempted to take it with me to Stockholm as my Stockholm knitting project. Maybe that'll be silly, we'll see. And I am really happy with the colours and the yarn, and I'm feeling good about it. It's just going to be a lot of knitting if I'm knitting it way off gauge. Yeah, I guess we'll wait and see. So yesterday I decided to take myself on a little trip to Oxford Yarn Store and choose some yarn. Now, I've been going on for about 2 years about how I'm going to knit an asymmetric cable jumper. I really have not shut up about this for the longest time, and I've not got around to doing it. And my plan was to knit it in rauma fivel, which I then ended up knitting that cardigan at the start of the episode in. So I decided to get some new yarn for it. Yeah, this is knitting for Olive. I want this jumper to be kind of heavy and warm and wintry. I also don't want the cables to be too intimidating, so I didn't want them to be at a very small gauge. And so I went for this combination. This is the heavy merino from Knitting for Olive, which is a 100% non-superwash merino. And this is the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair, which is a very standard silk mohair. They have a beautiful colour selection. I went for the shade Marzipan, which is a pinkish toned off-white. It's very pretty. I don't like yellowy creams, and Knitting for Olive have so many options for non-yellowy cream shades. It's actually slightly crazy. I bought 9 of these, which I'm hoping will be enough. Realistically, I may end up needing 10. I think 9 will be okay. 8 is 1,000 meters, so that's 1,125 meters. And then I got 5 of these. I will probably end up needing more mohair at least. Even the heavy merinos I have are not all the same dye lot. They did check in the shop and they were like, oh no, these aren't the same dye lot. Like, do you want to wait a few days and we can get you 9 in the same dye lot? And I was like, I always feel like I like my hand knits to look handmade, and I kind of just like embrace that about them. My big Albaville sweater definitely has a few incorrect stitches in the colourwork that I knitted while I was distracted, and yeah, I could go back and duplicate stitch them to fix them, but it's something I made and I want it to look like something I made. And so if there is a slight dye lot discrepancy, I actually don't care. If later I complain about the fact there's a line on my jumper where the dye lot changes, you can tell me that I'm silly and it's my own fault, okay? Anyway, I'm really happy with these. I look forward to knitting with them. I've used both of these yarns a bunch of times before. They're just really great. I can't recommend them enough. And then I also got some more sock yarn. I don't know why I got some more sock yarn. I think I forgot I got plain cream Lang sock yarn that I showed in the last episode. And so I got cream Isager sock yarn. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It will get used because cream socks are my favourite socks. They're the ones I wear the most. So any cream sock yarn in my stash gets used up very quickly compared to other colours. This is Isager sock, which I have used before. It's a pretty alpaca heavy sock yarn, I think. 40% easy wash alpaca, 40% merino, 20% nylon. We love a sock yarn with nylon in it. I think the easy wash thing is like their different superwash treatment that's supposed to be less environmentally harmful than conventional superwash treatment, but still allows the socks to be machine washed gently, I assume. I hand wash all my socks, so it doesn't make a difference to me. I find that this particular sock yarn felt quite a lot. In fact, I find that to be the case with a lot of alpaca sock yarn, but it is very soft. So if you want to knit quite a luxurious pair of socks, I recommend this one. Definitely a few months ago, you could very often find it on sale because they went from selling it as a single 100-gram ball to, well, I have to buy two 50-gram balls. And so a lot of the 100-gram balls were quite heavily discounted from a lot of different retailers. But yes, I just paid full price for two 50-gram balls this time. So that was a very satisfying yarn shop visit. I really like this yarn. It's all stuff I've used before and I know I love, in the sort of pale neutrals that I like wearing so much as well. I do have one more thing to show actually, and this is a book. I assume I am good to show this. This is, I guess, technically a sponsorship. I get quite a lot of offers for like sponsorships where I'm not paid. They're just like, oh, I can send you a pattern or I can send you some needles and you must make some posts about this item. And I generally think this is kind of a bad deal. Like, I already have needles that I really like, so I have no use for another set of needles for free. I don't want to make a post promoting something that I don't like that much. The only exception I'll make is if it's like something that I would have purchased and posted about anyway. And this book I knew was coming out, like I was aware of its existence, and I was really looking forward to picking up a copy. And so when I was offered a copy and yarn support to knit one of the patterns in the book, if I post about it, like I'm not being paid, but I'm gifted the book and the yarn, and I will post about it online. I did say yes. The book is knitted Moomin socks. If you know me, you'll know that I love Moomins. I own a lot of Moomin mugs. I have some hardback Moomin books that I enjoy very much. I just, you know, some people like Hello Kitty, some people like Karopi. Me, I like Moomins. I have never knitted a pair of colourwork socks, which is kind of surprising because I've done quite a lot of colourwork and I also have knitted a lot of socks. But colourwork socks have always really intimidated me because the idea of having to knit something in colourwork that you can stretch enough to put over your foot, and I have large feet, is very intimidating. And so I felt like this would actually be a really great place to start for me for colourwork socks, because this entire book, I think, is DK weight. So these should all be quite quick knits, a little bit less of an undertaking, you know? All these books use Novita Moomin House or Moomin Talo yarn. There's another language that I can't even take a guess at. Finnish. Strange language, right? Like, not similar to anything that I've learned before. It always seems very cool though. Part of me really wants to learn it, but I don't know who I'd speak to in it. Anyway, a lot of these socks do just have charts of different Moomin related things, which I think would come in really handy if you just wanted to knit a Moomin jumper, right? Like, there's a snufkin chart you could put on anything. It's a pretty short repeat because it's designed for socks, so you could just put it around a jumper if you're a snufkin fan. It also similarly has a lot of charts for duplicate stitching Moomin things. So if you want to knit a plaid jumper and then duplicate stitch on something from the Moomin books, there's a bunch of that in here. These patterns are by a few different, I assume, Finnish designers. And I think there are 29 patterns in here, which is kind of a lot of Moomin socks. I was able to pick which one I wanted to knit, and I am apparently getting yarn support from Novita. I haven't been sent the yarn yet, but I think it will arrive fairly soon. And so the pattern I'm going to knit is by Sonja Nikkanen, and it's called the Moomin House. So if you know what the Moomin House looks like, I'm sure you'll be very charmed by these bad boys. There's like a textured lace pattern on the cuff that looks like roof tiles, which is very, very cute. And then this is like stranded colourwork, and it has duplicate stitching here and there as well, so you shouldn't have to use more than 2 colours at once. I always appreciate that. I'm definitely not a good colourwork knitter when it comes to more than 2 colours at the same time. The other reason I picked this pattern is because I know I want to knit this one at some point, right? But like, I plan on hopefully knitting more than one pattern from this book, and so maybe I could knit it later. But this pattern uses maybe like 6 colours of yarn, and I'm not really a colourful yarn person, so my entire sock yarn scraps collection is very neutral colours. And so I would have to go out and buy 6 colours of yarn probably to knit this. I mean, maybe I have enough scrap cream, but basically everything else I'd have to buy specifically for this project. And so I figured I'd make the most of the yarn support and get yarn support in all of these colours. And then when I want to make like snuffkin fishing socks, I can do that later with neutral yarn that I already have. I've used Novita sock yarn once before. I've used, I guess, like a standard fingering weight sock yarn, but I'm really looking forward to trying out this DK weight sock yarn. I love DK weight socks, and I think these will be really cute, cozy socks for winter. So yeah, that's the knitted Moomin socks book. I'm really excited to cast these on. I just need that yarn support to arrive. Fingers crossed the postal service is feeling speedy. So I think that's everything for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. My camera has been playing up throughout, so I hope it's all worked out okay. It keeps stopping recording. I think the little dial that selects what setting the camera on is broken because it keeps complaining that it's like not positioned properly and then stopping recording. But I think I've got everything that I need. So thank you very much for watching. I'll be back again soon with another knitting podcast as always, and goodbye.